different medical avenues. And then, of course, I'm linked in with American Massage Therapy Association. So I get a lot of things that a lot of the general public don't see. And that's part of why we're doing this show. So I can share that kind of stuff with you guys. So you're a little bit more educated on it. So the title of this article, and it's super duper long, like I said, it's Recovering Body and Soul from Post-Traumatic Stress. And it says post-traumatic stress disorder, but I don't like to call it that because you weren't born with it. It's not a disorder. It's something that has happened to you. It's not who you are, but it becomes a part of you. And so I don't like to call it PTSD. I mean, I don't know. How do you feel about that, Country?
Well, it's PTS is, you're exactly right. You're not born with it. It's something that's happened to you. That's why it's called post-traumatic stress. It's not a disorder. That's something that doctors in the VA and shit wanted to put on the end of it, for medical purposes and stuff like that. But you know what? It really takes some studying and some looking into if you don't have this, if you do not have this type of stress, because it affects somebody in many, many ways. And there's a lot of ways that it can affect you. It just depends on exactly what it is that happened to you in that moment of that traumatic event is how it affects you. I think everybody gets the anxiety and the depression part, but there are some different parts that you can have as well. Such as nightmares, flashbacks.
The flashback, the dreams, different things that, we were talking about this a little bit earlier on the 3%er morning show. Like, a lot of spouses aren't equipped to deal with these things when their significant other comes home. And, unless you're going to sit here and you're going to educate yourself and do hours of reading and figure out what exactly is going on with your veteran, you're not going to understand. Because there's so much that's tied into PTS that a lot of people won't. And what you see on the outside, you need to magnify that by 1,000,000 on the inside.
Yeah.
In my personal opinion. I mean, I've watched my spouse go through it. Somebody who was active, had a full-time job, was working on their master's, and then boom. I just watched his life, be ripped from him. And it's very sad. And a lot of people, unless you educate yourself, you can't handle it unless you have the tools to equip yourself.
That's right.
So since you brought up like the clinical or the definition of it and how deep it is, this article actually has the clinical definition. Criteria A has been exposed to a traumatic event involving act or threatened death or injury during which the individual responded with panic, horror, terror, or feeling of helplessness. Criteria B is re-experiencing the trauma in forms of dreams, flashbacks, intrusive memories, unrest, and at being situations that remind the individual of the original trauma. So basically what they're describing there is like triggers. I know, certain people have triggers for different things that, will make them black out and have flashback, and then they're waking up, they're like, what the fuck just happened? So that's one of the other criteria. In the medical clinical definition, evidence of avoidance behavior, numbing of emotions, and the reduced interest of other persons in the outside world. And that is a very big one. If you know somebody who was always like out there partying, had 1,000,001 friends, and then all of a sudden they disappear off the face of the planet, you need to get in touch with them immediately. I'm talking like ASAP. As soon as you realize, like, holy shit, like, he hasn't been out in 2 weeks. Like, where the fuck is he at? You need to reach out and be like, hey, brother, or hey, sister, like, what's going on? Can I come over, have a beer with you? Or, can we talk? Because a lot of times the people who end up becoming one of the 22 do that. They become a recluse. And nobody reaches out to give them that hand. I mean, don't you see that in the pattern, Country?
Yep. Because there's a lot of people, that's a good point. Because a lot of people, they end up as a part of the 22 statistic, are people that have been segregated away from the general public, their families, their immediate families. That look of change is really in you, and something that's not necessarily you see that a lot of other people do see. Such as, we'll take us combat veterans for example. Our families. I know for fact my fucking family does, but it's like my dad, my stepmom, my stepbrothers and stuff. They just look at me like, holy shit, this guy right here has definitely changed. My first flashback was at my father's house, and he was just like, they don't ever look at you the same. And
right.
If they're not going to educate themselves and try to help be a part of the solution, then they become a part of the problem, because it's like, why do you want to fucking be around them if they're going to treat you differently? They should.
Right. It becomes a thing of judgment instead of a thing of empathy.
Yep. Sure does.
And that judgment is what we need to rid society of, because that just pushes it even further into, like yourself. Like, I'm sure that made your PTS and the things that you've gone through 10 times worse, knowing that your family was judging you.
Oh yeah, they still do today.
Couldn't control.
They still do today. Last time we had plans to go over to my dad's house was to see my niece Hazel for the first time, and stepmother had a day off. She hadn't seen me and my little brother, and she took off. She wanted to go hang out somewhere else, and my dad was left there cooking and shit like this. And me and my half brother Kyle, we actually kind of picked on him a little bit, because he lets her opinions get in a little bit. It gets in the way of too much of his actual thinking. And like, there's a family tree against the wall, and we're not on it. I'm like, wow, really?
Wow.
I looked at Kyle and I hit him. I was like, dude, I said, look at this shit, man. I was like, your name's on here, but your wife, your kid, I was like, my name's not on there at all. It's like,
damn.
Yeah, it's like, hey, we have been around for like 37 years. Just saying.
By the way, I am your child.
But you know what? And that pushes us to an emotional state of numbness too.
Yep.
Because that's, like right now, would I be sad if my dad passed away? Yeah.
Probably not.
Well, I would to a point, but would I show any emotion or anything like that to him? Probably not. That's where I would just be like,
you'd be sad because he was your dad and he passed away, but you wouldn't have the emotions like I had when my brother died.
Right.
Like, you know what I mean?
Uncontrollable crying and being hysterical over the fact of the matter. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, okay. Experiences psychological hyperarousal as evidenced by insomnia, agitation, irritability, and outbursts of rage. And then the symptoms from B, C, and D, so the 3 that I just read, persist for at least 1 month or more. And then the symptoms have significantly affected the person's social or vocational abilities or other important areas of life. And then this next part is a really important part, because this is a part where a lot of people get judgmental and they get caught up in their own feelings because they don't fucking understand it. PTS may be either acute or delayed in onset. Acute PTS occurs within 6 months of a traumatic event. Delayed onset may occur anytime later than 6 months after the traumatic event. This may be a year, 10 years, 20 years, or even 40 years after the event. So if you have somebody that comes home and they're good, they get transitioned okay. Transitioning is a huge, big part of the PTS problem and the depression problem that we have today. But say they get transitioned okay, they're in a job for like 5 or 6 years, and then all of a sudden they start having all of these symptoms. Well, you got to look back further than the immediate. Mm-hmm. You got to look back at what they've been through. It can be a delayed onset, and that's what a lot of people don't understand. Like, you've been fine for 5 years, you don't have PTS, you're just looking for fucking attention. No, asshole. Fuck you. Like, this is real. And I mean, I see that more and more often than anything. I mean, what do you think?
Well, that's one of the reasons why they give you this temporary retired status as you're on your way out, especially if PTS is your main point of factor in your medical retirement, so to speak, because they give you that 5 years allotted time to see if anything's going to creep back up. You know, your PTS, everybody's different. You know, somebody's PTS might not hit them until 2, 3, 4 years later from the actual event. Some of them hits them within a couple of months.
Or even an hour.
Yeah, exactly. You know, mine for me, let's see, December, January, February, March, April. It hit about 6 months afterwards. And that was like right after I was diagnosed. I didn't even want to go to the doctor. I was forced to by my chain of command. It's like, dude, you need to go see somebody. I'm like, what the fuck is y'all's problem? Yeah, I was in there wondering. I was like, what the fuck do I need to go see somebody for? Ain't nothing fucking wrong with me. And when I got in there, you know, within a month later, they had diagnosed me with a very high form of it. And I was like, well, son of a bitch.
Right, and that's like the other day when Ghost was saying, like, no, like they diagnosed it with him with it, sent him home with pills, and fucking didn't explain any of it to him. So he's sitting there trying to work through everything on his own, and that makes your anxiety even worse.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so those are just some of the criteria or whatever, and then they have like 20 different signs and symptoms. But what I want to read to you guys, where did it go? Okay, is the part with the research is involving touch. So in 1958, Harry F. Harlow demonstrated the artificial or surrogate mother made of demonstrated that artificial or surrogate mothers made of wire mesh and terry cloth, which offered no food, were preferable to either infant monkeys, or wired mesh structures providing milk. The monkeys spend most of their infancy in close contact with ventral portion of their mother. Harlow populated the monkeys, needed contact and nurturing as much as, if not more than, the food in order to thrive. So these findings may be compared with the reports of emaciated, touch-deprived infants found in Romanian orphanages after the overthrow of whatever the fuck that country is. The Romanian orphans had difficulty relating to other humans, exhibiting little or no language skills, and showed little or no emotional response or effect. So if you haven't read about that, there's a whole nother article on the Romanian orphanages. Basically, these babies were left to cry it out. There was no physical touch, no physical contact or anything like that. And like later on, they had to start doing like touch therapy with these children to really get them to start to re-engage with, you know, humankind, I guess you could say, because you cannot thrive without touch is basically what a lot of the research has been shown. I think that's pretty much it. It goes into why massage therapy is good for our for people with PTS and helping thrive. Massage therapy can offer a profound sense of peace to those who are feeling strong enough at their core, and for those that carry the effects of trauma, the world does not feel safe. They cannot trust their bodies or give the appropriate signals of safety. So when you start to build that trust in them again by working with them in a safe environment where they trust you and they feel like you know, like you're taking care of them, it'll have an effect on their entire life, because eventually they will slowly start to come back to, you know, feeling that trust. I mean, the distrust for the world is never going to fully go away, but it at least can help to, you know, put Band-Aids and help to rebuild that foundation a little bit. I know because of things I've been through, when I go to a restaurant, I have to sit with my back to a wall and know where the exit is.
Yep.
What about, I mean, are you the same way?
Yeah, I mean, I used to be really, really bad that way, but I try to, you know, especially if I'm in a crowd of friends and stuff like that, I try to surround myself with what they're talking about, what they're doing, you know, and try to sit in that awkward place